Okay, so just a reminder, this is Mrs. Ross and this is 2.4 inverse functions. Continued. Okay. So it says for each of the functions below, determine if the inverse of the function is a function, which means we need to know if it's one-to-one. If the inverse is a function, find the inverse and state the domain and range of that. So let's do A first. So the first thing we have to do is to determine if it's 1-to-1. Okay. So if I do x1 to the fourth and x2 to the fourth, and then I fourth root that, because why not? I'm going to get plus or minus x1 is equal to plus or minus x2. Now this is not 1-to-1, okay? Because x1 and x2 can be either positive or negative, so they won't be the same. So we're not going to find the inverse of that. So I'm going to erase that. All right, so on B, first step is to determine if it's 1-to-1. Determine if it's 1-to-1. And so the way that we do that is we plug in 5, x1 minus 6 equals 5, x2 minus 6. We're going to cross multiply. So I have 5 times x1 minus 6 is equal to 5 times x2 minus 6. I'm going to divide both sides by 5. I get x1 minus 6 is equal to x2 minus 6. If I add 6 to both sides, I get x1 is equal to x2. This is 1-to-1. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the inverse. To find inverse. Okay, so we have y is equal to 5 over x minus 6. We're going to switch x and y. Okay, I'm going to divide by x because we're solving for y. Okay, so that's my inverse. Now, I know up here, let's get a different color. I know up here my domain of g of x is equal to, well, x cannot be equal to 6, so it's going to be negative infinity to 6, 6 to infinity. That's my domain. And I know that the domain of g of x is equal to the range of the inverse. So the range of blah blah is this. Now we have to find the domain. So the domain of the inverse, I know that x cannot equal 0. So that means we're doing negative infinity to 0, union 0 to infinity. And that's it. Let me know if you have any questions.